Hope you're enjoying your whatever day of quarantine. Hope you're staying safe and clean, and I'm sure you're tired of hearing that, but it's the right thing to do. Anyway, today's book that we're going to be dissecting is going to be Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye, another Toni book, and I've decided that I'm going to do every single one of her books as a review just because I've been enjoying the little short small conversations I've been having in my comment section on the last book, and the Song of Solomon one was probably one of my favorites as far as that goes. I'm going to stick to what I originally said in my last video, which was the review for Jazz. I'm going to start with summary and why I chose the book. Then I'm going to go into character of focus, and then I'm going to go into the connection of focus between two individuals that stood out to me. Now, let's get started. So I'm going to start by reading the back of the novel as to make the summary much easier for you guys. And it reads, Cholly Breedlove, a young black girl, prays every day for beauty. Mocked by other children for the dark skin, curly hair, and brown eyes that set her apart, she yearns for the blonde hair and blue eyes that she believes will allow her to finally fit in. Yet as her dream grows more fervent, her life slowly starts to disintegrate in the face of adversity and strife. A brilliant examination of our obsession with beauty and conformity, Toni Morrison's virtuosic first novel asks powerful questions about race, class, and gender with the subtlety and grace that have always characterized her writing. This novel is set in 1941 Ohio, and it's important for me to mention that it's set in Ohio because that's where Toni Morrison grew up. As I was reading the novel, I could tell that a lot of Toni's childhood influenced her first novel. If you didn't catch that from the back of the book, this is in fact Toni's first novel, and a lot of people would say that it's her most raw novel. And as I'm explaining this to you and thinking of all the things I'm going to be telling you, I will agree that I think it is one of her rawest novels next to Beloved.
It's in other words, it's not a literary question. It has nothing to do with the literary imagination. It's a sociological question that should not be put to me. I couldn't ask that of any writer who was, I wouldn't ask it of a black writer when you're going to write about white people. I have had reviews in the past that have accused me of not writing about white people. I remember a review of Sula in which the reviewer said, this is all well and good, but one day she, meaning me, will have to face up to the real responsibilities and get mature and write about the real confrontation for black people, which is white people. As though our lives have no meaning and no depth without the white gaze. It has nothing to do with who reads the books. Everyone of any race, any gender, any country. But my sovereignty and my authority as a racialized person had to be struck immediately with the very first book. And it was strange because in this country, many books, particularly then, 40s, 50s, you could feel the address of the narrator over my shoulder, talking to somebody else, talking to somebody white. I could tell because they're explaining things that they didn't have to explain if they were talking to me.
It's important to mention Cholly because Cholly is pretty much the center of the entire story. She's this dark-skinned, chocolate, beautiful little girl who sees no value in beauty in herself whatsoever. And why would she in a society that keeps telling her that she's ugly? And even though all of her family, her mom, her dad, and her brother are all chocolate too, they're all miserable. The Breedloves in general are miserable, and she doesn't receive that affection and love for them as well. And all of these terrible things keep happening to her, and she's not receiving the protection and love that she deserves and that young girls require. But a lot of black girls are neglected because they're not worthy in most people's eyes. The reason why I chose this novel is because of a story that I heard that Toni told. And I'm sure for all of you Toni fans out there who are huge fans like me, you've heard this story before.
I remember an incident from my own childhood when a very close friend of mine and we were walking down the street. We were discussing whether God existed. And she said he did not. And I said he did. But then she said she had proof. She said, I have been praying for 2 years for blue eyes, and he never gave me any. So I just remember turning around and looking at her. She was very, very black, and she was very, 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 very beautiful. How painful. Can you imagine that kind of pain? About color. So I wanted to say, this kind of racism hurts. This is not lynchings and murders and drownings. This is interior pain. So deep for an 11-year-old girl to believe that if she only had some characteristic of the white world, she would be okay.
It was not only the fact that what the girl was telling her was sad, it was also the simple fact that the girl, in a way, distorted how Toni was feeling already. Because what Toni felt at the time was that she was beautiful. She thought that black people were beautiful. So to hear black girls hate themselves really messed up a lot of her ego in a way, if that makes sense. Like, it didn't stop her from believing that she was beautiful, and it didn't stop her from believing that all black people were beautiful, but it messed with her. She was like, my feelings were hurt because what I considered beautiful, somebody kept calling ugly, and I didn't like that. It's for so many reasons I chose this book. I chose this book because of that story. I chose that book because black girls are never taken seriously. We are always at the bottom of the barrel. And even when you talk about beauty standards and it sounds so frivolous and superficial, like, these things really mess with us. And that's another thing that Toni mentions in her documentary. I don't know if you guys know that, but her documentary, I think, is titled As I Am. It's on Hulu. But she says, like, we're always talking about the physicality of racism. We're always talking about the lynchings and, the water hoses and being beaten. We talk about all those terrible things because they are terrible. But she was like, what's worse to me than that is internal. Like, after her hearing that little girl say that, she was like, that's a different type of pain that you can't just stop. It can't just go away. It just stays with you forever. I also love how well Toni highlights black girlhood in this novel, because it's not just about us trying to live up to white beauty standards, which is of course the main point of this novel, but she just talks about how sexuality also distorts us in that time period. Because for a lot of black women, or a lot of black girls, we grow up not having family members who are comfortable bringing us into sexual maturity, because in their heads everything just leads to sex. But there are a lot of things that we don't know that we need to know. Like, if a man touches us, in the novel, and I don't have a problem saying this because it's literally in the first paragraph of the novel when you start reading it, you find out that Piccola gets raped by her father and ends up pregnant. And seeing how everybody treats her based on her appearance, and these are people in the black community, they're just saying things like, oh, that's an awful thing to happen, but oh my goodness, like, I hope that baby ends up dying because that baby's gonna be just as ugly as her, and even like just all these terrible things that these old adults are saying. And then Claudia, the youngest one, is hearing all this, and it's just like, my God, it's just, you're over here, nobody's like saying anything loving or affectionate about this girl. Nobody's reaching out a hand and trying to console her. Nobody's checking in on her. Nobody's offering to take care of her. They're just like, oh, that's a damn shame. But Jesus, like, that girl's so ugly. Like, I hope that baby doesn't end up being born. I hope something bad happens so that she can just get rid of it. And then on another hand, Frieda, Claudia's older sister, she ends up being touched by a man in the novel And their response to that is completely different because she has a loving family. She has a loving mom and loving dad, and they're doing anything in their power to protect her. But Frieda is so confused because, you know, I love how Toni always has it where these kids can hear the conversations around them from the adults, because the adults are like, oh man, I hope she's not ruined, or what if she ends up being like one of those prostitutes? Like, just they're just hearing all this chatter around them. And because these black girls aren't being given the necessary conversations surrounding sex and maturity, Frieda's freaking out when she hears that she's ruined. She's like, what does that mean? I'm ruined and nobody's good. Like, she doesn't even know what that means. And honestly, the adults don't even know what the hell they're talking about. So it's a lot. But Toni does a great job, per usual. Quiet as it's kept, there were no marigolds in the fall of 1941. We thought, at the time, that it was because Piccola was having her father's baby that the marigolds did not grow. A little examination and much less melancholy would have proved to us that our seeds were not the only ones that did not sprout. Nobody's did. Not even the gardens of fronting the lake showed marigolds that year. But so deeply concerned were we with the health and safe delivery of Piccola's baby, we could think of nothing but our own magic. If we planted the seeds and said the right words over them, they would blossom and everything would be all right. Okay. So the character of focus, and why I read that little excerpt from the book, is Cholly Breedlove. And Cholly Breedlove is Piccola's father, the man that impregnates and rapes his own daughter. And I just want to make that clear that this is definitely not one of those times where I'm defending a monstrous villain. There's no saving him or redeeming him. But I thought it important to talk about him because, you know, when you find out, I read this book multiple times. And after the first time, I had to read it again because I wanted to dig deep into his story and figure out why he would do such a terrible thing to his own daughter. And basically, growing up, his mother didn't want him. His father was nowhere in the picture. So he was raised by his grandmother. And unfortunately, I think he has to be like 13, 14, maybe a little bit younger. I'm not sure. She ends up dying. And at first he doesn't really know how he feels about it, doesn't really know what to think, but he has a moment, and this moment is very important to me, I feel, where after the funeral, he's hanging out with the kids, and he experiences one of his first joyous moments before things just took an ugly turn. And that joyous moment was the first time that he ever touched a girl. And unfortunately, during that moment, during his first time, they end up being interrupted by these two racist white men, obviously, who shine a light on them and basically force him to keep having sex with this young girl that he's sleeping with until he finishes. So his first experience that started off so lovely and beautiful that he still remembers as that beautiful moment was ruined by humiliation and racism. And he didn't really know who else to place his anger on but that girl. He doesn't do anything bad to her, but in his head he's thinking, God, I hate her. How could she do this to me? Because deep underneath that feeling is the feeling of, I know who I need to be mad at. I'm mad at these white men, but I can't do anything about it. So it's easier for me to hate this young black girl than it is for me to deal with the fact that I have no control over my life. So that's one point. Long story short, he doesn't want to go live with his cousins and runs away and thinks that he's going to actually find his father because he knows his mom doesn't want him. He ends up taking the money that his grandmother had left behind, going to travel to see his dad, or who he thinks his dad is. And I forget the name. I think his name was like Frank or something. He literally only has one name. No last name, nothing. And he goes on a train. And the story is just so weird, but he asks this random person, hey, do you know where this guy Frank is? And he's like, oh yeah, I think he's over there. And this guy's like playing craps or whatever. And he just asks him a simple question like, hey, are you my father? Or like, you're my father. And the guy is just all like, man, what the hell? I already told that bitch I done paid her this, that, and the third. Get out of my face. Like, he has a terrible moment like that, like one of those "get away from me, little nigga." He has one of those little nigga moments and is crushed, distraught, so much so that he cries hard and ends up soiling his pants, like literally pissing and shitting himself, because not only was he just like, nobody wants me, and that's what really crushed his spirit, but I have nobody. Like, in that moment, he realizes how much he loved his grandmother and how much he's going to miss her and how much he does miss her and how he just doesn't have a home anymore. I just felt like it was super important for me to mention the humiliation with these, because this is how he ends up showing affection and love as he gets older. They just skip right over to when he's married to Mrs. Breedlove, and everything's all good at first, but then it just kind of goes to shit. And I won't go into details of that because I want to just focus on him as a character. And it's this humiliation that he's trying to get away from, and ironically ends up placing on his daughter. And it's just a mixture of things. Like, when he sees her before he actually puts his hands on her and rapes his daughter, she is washing the dishes and he's looking at her from behind, and all these thoughts are going through his head about love and his lack of understanding of love, because he doesn't even love himself, and how he'll have these random moments of love for his children and hate himself right after he realizes that he loves them. And she has like mannerisms like her mother, so that's an added layer to it. But he also sees himself in her and knows that just like him, she feels no value or sees no value in herself, and it just kind of goes from there. As a trigger warning, and I won't go into the rape itself, but I just had to focus on him because I love personally when Black women authors decide to talk about things from a Black male perspective, especially Toni, because there's an added layer of femininity that I don't think is there when a lot of men try to tell their own stories. Everything is just too matter of fact sometimes when I really need depth. And I don't know how she does it, but Toni is so great at showing Black men for who they really are while still maintaining that mystery. Because even though you understand that he clearly isn't happy and he's miserable, you sense why he does some of the things that he does, there's still an added layer of, but why did you do what you do? Or like, who are you when it comes to Black men? And maybe that's supposed to be a way to show us that a lot of Black men don't know who they are yet, or what their worth is, or where it lies in. It's very interesting. I have these moments where I'm talking to y'all and I'm also thinking at the same time. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Another reason why I chose Cholly is because he is a great example for one of the main themes of the book. And one of those themes is satisfying your appetite versus suppressing your desires. And I think for a lot of characters in this book, they all have a traumatic experience like he did when he was making love to that girl. Making love to that girl was one of his few cherished moments. Same thing with a memory he has with a watermelon being crushed and eating the best part of a watermelon and the juices that flow. Like, those two memories are some of his most satisfying ones. And unfortunately, one of them is tainted with humiliation. So a lot of his life after that, he spends his time holding on and suppressing versus letting go and enjoying what he knows his body and his mind will allow him to enjoy. So for the connection of focus, I decided to choose the relationship between Claudia and her older sister Frieda. And I really want to focus on them, not only because they're the youngest ones who seem to have the most sense and the most empathy in the book, but I love genuine connections between Black women and Black girls. Out of the entire novel, they uplift each other the most. They're the most confident as well. Frieda, not as much as Claudia, Claudia is comfortable in her dirt, and she's comfortable being a black girl, and she doesn't like getting a Shirley Temple doll and all that other shit. You know, Frieda, she dabbles, but the point is that they have each other's back, and I love that, because I think that's a huge theme in a lot of black girls' lives, is that our greatest connections are with other black women and other black girls. However you may see that, whether it's with a family member or if you're blessed enough to actually make a friend, like, those are usually our first real connections, are with other black women. And the part where I realized, or I knew that I was going to focus on them more so than any other connection in the book, is when this new light-skinned mulatto girl comes to the school, and it's important that she gets brought into this story because, as we know, Pecola is the dark-skinned one. You know, she's the one that people are claiming is ugly. But Maureen comes in, and not only does she highlight, or not only does she show in a way how much Pecola dislikes herself, but she starts to raise these emotions in Claudia and Frieda, who have never had these feelings before. But they had these feelings now because they see this girl Maureen being treated differently by the entire school, by their own people. Like, other black people treating her differently, the black boys treating her differently, even black girls treating her differently. And it breeds this jealousy that Claudia has never felt before. And they hate it. They hate how jealous the both of them are. You know, it's just so weird how they can see themselves from the outside. They're like, I know that I'm jealous and I'm angry right now and I hate myself for it, but can you blame me? Or like, or why am I feeling this way? I've never felt like this before. And what does it mean to be ugly? And what does it mean to be pretty? Just all these things. Maureen comes in and just like shits and destroys their entire perception of beauty. Kind of like how I was saying about Toni and how she felt a type of way when this, you know, her best friend at the time challenged her ideal of beauty, because her ideal of beauty was dark skin, chocolate, black people. In that moment, they end up getting into a fight, of course, and the mulatto chick, she starts to show real colorism and racism toward her own, and they get into a huge fight with her. And it's in that moment that I really was like, I fuck with their connection, because after that whole tension-filled argument went down and Maureen runs away like the little coward that she is, and Pecola's all crying and emotional, it's a lot, I don't want to go into the fight. They're like, I want something sweet, and they really, well, Claudia's like, I really want ice cream, I want ice cream, and Frieda's like making all these excuses, because what she really wants to say is, I don't want to go and get that ice cream because I don't want to go to that store where that light-skinned bitch went, like, I hate her. Like, that's pretty much what Frieda really wanted to say, but they don't have to like say it to each other. It's what I love. Like, she knows. Claudia's like, no, I want to get ice cream, I want to get ice cream. And Frieda's like, Claudia, no, you don't want ice cream. But that's all she has to say. And Claudia's like, all right, fine, I guess I don't want ice cream. Because what they're saying is, I don't want to be that girl. I don't want to be Maureen. I want to be me. Maybe other people could take it a different way. Maybe people could take it as, oh, in that moment they felt defeated. Because there was a little bit of defeat in that. It's like, I don't want to get that ice cream. Like, you know, their feelings were hurt. They don't say it, but you feel it and you know it. That's what that whole scene is about, is their realities being shaken. And for the first time realizing that the world doesn't find them special. I think they're like a nice medium. I think for lower class and lower middle class black people, we can see ourselves in their characters. They're not the lowest of the low, like they're not the poorest of the poor like Pecola, but they're also not like the highest of the high like Maureen, the mulatto chick. They're like a regular, they're the most normal, non-normal connection and characters in the whole book, because, you know, of course even they have their own issues, but ultimately it's like the typical black experience is what I get when I read about Claudia and Frieda. When they explain their upbringing and their experience, it makes complete sense. It feels like my home, and I'm sure it probably feels like millions of other people's homes. So it was just a great depiction of class and of shades. I was gonna say race. I could say race, but you know, when it comes to Toni, it's always just black or white. But I will say shades because she does that even better, explaining the black experience depending on what you look like. the irony surrounding it, because like I said, nobody takes black girls seriously. But when you read from Claudia's perspective, I don't see why you couldn't take her seriously. She seems to understand what's going on the most without understanding. So that was a lot. I hope this made sense to you guys. I am so sorry, but Bluest Eye is probably one of the most difficult books for me to explain. Explaining Toni's books in general is the most, it's so difficult, which is why if I plan to ever make a film, a Toni Morrison film, that script was gonna take me forever. So I hope that made sense. I hope you enjoyed. I might have to like do another video to redeem this, because I don't even know if I made any sense at all. But I love Bluest Eye. It is definitely one of her best. And I really encourage you guys to watch the documentary on Hulu if you have the time. I think you'll really enjoy it and gain even more respect for Toni, because I just love her. So yeah, until next time, stay safe. Once again, stay clean, and try your best to enjoy this quarantine.